What's up, guys? PDC here, and today I want to talk about a topic which I see brought up pretty frequently in competitive Pokemon circles, especially on YouTube, and even in like the OU Council chat and high level competitive forums. Like Smokin specifically, like policy review. This has been brought up in every Discord chat I've been in. This has been a thing since Sun and Moon was an official metagame, and that is if lando-t is broken, if Toxapex is broken, if this metagame is broken, and as of recent, it feels like everyone is really reaching a conclusion that we need to do something about the metagame. And to be honest, I think that this metagame is objectively perfect. It's a bad metagame. You're completely right in saying this metagame sucks. It is over-centralized. It's a bad metagame. I don't like to play it. It's Lando Toxapex, insert Kartana Magirna Flexfest. It's an orgy of the top 6 usage mons on every team. You're completely right in saying that. But I believe that this metagame is something that you cannot actually take action on. And today I'm going to explain why I feel that way and why overall I think that we should essentially do nothing because we've reached the ideal metagame. Or at least the ideal metagame without dropping down any Pokemon. So you probably think I'm fucking crazy. I don't think there's anything broken in this metagame. I don't think lando-t is broken. I don't think Toxapex is broken. I certainly don't think Kartana is broken, although that thing's a cunt for stall. And any other, I don't think Magirna is broken either. I don't think any of these Pokemon are broken. And this, it may come as a shock to some, because some people, even in the council chat, I'm still in there, think that this metagame is bad. And I think it's bad too. I think this metagame is unenjoyable, and I've only played it for a very limited time. I think that it's centralized, I think that it's Toxapex Lando everywhere, and looking at usage stats for tournaments and the ladder alike, it is over the top ridiculous in the way that teams are constructed, and how it's basically the same thing. The usage stats are crazy. But that's not what I care about. There is nothing broken in this metagame. Is it centralized? Yes, it is centralized. This metagame is undoubtedly hyper-centralized around Toxapex and Lando. But I don't think that makes it a metagame that is deserving correction. When I was a tier leader, and for as long as I ever remember having an opinion on tiering philosophy, I forget who originally said this, it may have been Alderon, but I picked this up from somebody in the old days, and I've kind of always stuck with it because I kind of always felt that it was the objectively right thing to do. I don't think that our objective, and this is coming from a person who was a tier leader, keep in mind, I led the OU tier, or I didn't lead it, but I was on a council, which I'll just, for simple purposes, I'll say I led the OU tier. When I was tier leader, my criteria was never a metagame being enjoyable. I don't give a shit if a metagame is fun. I don't care if it's diverse. I don't care if there is creativity to be found. I do not care. It is nothing to me if a metagame is absolutely unplayable, but there's nothing broken in it. Because I think that our tiering philosophy should not be based on subjectivity and something like enjoyability. I just don't. Now, I'm going to posit that there is nothing broken in this metagame for the sake of this video. I'm not going to be disproving in saying these mons are not broken, outside of the argument of centralization. That is the centralization is the paramount argument for most people when they talk about there's something wrong in this metagame. And I think that that is a bad argument, both historically and logically. Centralization has been a cited reason for something being broken, but the centralization is not coming from something that is broken. It's coming from a demand and a reaction to the metagame. For example, when I'll use a recent ban, Pheromosa was banned. I'm sure most of you remember that. The metagame was undoubtedly centralized around Pheromosa. But Pheromosa was broken. Formosa was fucking ridiculous to play against. Lando and Toxapex are not broken in their own right. They are just used to a very high amount. If you take Lando and Toxapex and look at them objectively, there's really nothing broken about them. The main demand is that they're unhealthy for the metagame. But unhealthy doesn't really mean all that much when you just say it's used a lot. Because in many metagames, things are used a lot. Tyranitar in SPL or in Black and White is used a lot. That is hypercentralization. And that can, I'm not here to argue about that metagame either, but that's an example of it. Jirachi and Heatran and Tyranitar and Breloom in DVP, that's hypercentralization. ADV is hypercentralized around spikes, TSS teams. Gen 6, well, I can't really say that, but recently it was centralized incredibly around Dugtrio. And I think we banned Arena Trap in Gen 6, but we didn't really ban it because of the centralization. It's because Arena Trap was deemed uncompetitive. Just because a metagame is hyper-centralized around something is not a good argument to ban it. That's just being really, really popular. And unhealthiness is pretty hard to call, because unhealthiness can be cited as a reason, but unhealthiness is usually cited as a reason because it's creating diversity, which is false, such as you have to use explicit gimmicks to counter a Pokemon which is so broken. At any rate, people are really unhappy with the metagame right now, and I'm not on council. I don't even contribute to any of the discussion anymore, because I really cannot say that I have an opinion that's higher than TDK's or equal value to Finch's, but from looking at the metagame, just from a spectator stance, I can tell you guys that this is not a metagame which we should really be tampering. I don't see a reason we should. At least not for now. Maybe wait another month or so to see how this thing settles. A lot of people, NJMP for example, makes video after video about how this metagame is fucking bad. And I agree with him, this metagame is boring, it's bad, and it's something I don't want to actively play. But just because it's bad doesn't mean it's something we should alter. So why is my philosophy like this? In a metagame where you have these 4 mons, which with usage stats that are at 30% at a total level, 39 at a 1500 and above level, 52 at a 1695 level, and 53 at an 1825 level. Why would I... This seems like an obvious answer. This mod is used everywhere in the ladder. It has over 50% usage. There is nearly a... It's ridiculous. It's almost a double the difference from Magirna to Lando. PDC, you're crazy. You should ban this because obviously Lando is having an adverse effect in the metagame. That's where I think you're wrong. I don't think Landorus is really having an adverse effect on anything. It's prevalent and it's used a lot. The argument for banning it is that it's unhealthy, and like I said, I don't think unhealthy means much when your unhealthiness is just gauging how shitty it is to play. When I talk about a philosophy of relatively objective banning, it's hard to objectively prove something is broken in Pokemon. But using an absolutely incredibly subjective language such as, this is a boring metagame, is not getting you anywhere. It's just not. Why am I against this this metagame banning and recreation based on unhappiness? Well, I'll give you a couple of reasons. For one, I think that this is similar to the complex ban issue. You're gauging a metagame and banning it based on how much you enjoy it. Well, how much do you enjoy it? It's hard to prove objectively that this metagame is shit. For a lot of people, this metagame is probably really enjoyable. So just saying that I want to ban something based on how bad this makes the metagame is pretty asinine. You shouldn't be doing it. There is no reason for you to interject your feelings, your personal feelings as a tier leader into the tier. There's a reason when you can easily make an argument for something being, broken based on criteria, but just broken based on because you think this metagame's bad doesn't mean much. I remember I said this in a few tests back, I think this was in the first Doug Show test, where I said that we have reached the objectively perfect metagame. And by that, I didn't mean that the metagame is enjoyable. but I meant that there was really nothing broken. And while we banned Dugtrio later in that specific metagame, there was nothing broken about Arena Trap or Dugtrio-based teams. We banned it later when it became a real issue, and we banned it on its uncompetitiveness. But in the time, I felt that there was truly nothing wrong with the metagame, and while I didn't have a lot of fun playing it, I didn't feel like I had an actual reason to go ahead and alter it. Alterations based on your feelings are bad, and a lot of people like to treat this game as something that they can just toy around with. And I'm not saying that this is like some existentialist, wow, it's more than a game. It's a game. But we are trying and to, helpfully conserve our competitive integrity, base our interjections and our alterations on logic and at least somewhat of an objective field. Back in DPP, we had very strict, elucidated criteria about what we had to do to declare Pokemon broken. It's not about the metagame being bad. It's not about the metagame being unfun. And while a metagame being shitty can be a symptom from a broken Pokemon existing in it, the metagame being bad by itself doesn't mean much and should not be a criteria to ban it. It's just not something that I think you should ever judge anything on. Now, on the subject of unbanning Pokemon, let's talk about that. Do I think that we should unban certain Pokemon and try and make the metagame better? Well, we could, because objectively, again, you want to have the most expansive OU metagame with everything that is not broken in allowed. And that's fine. There is nothing wrong with unbanning a Pokemon that you think would be viable and not broken in the OU metagame. Again, our mission as a tier leader is to create the ideal metagame where there is nothing that is broken in it. And of course, this is a hard thing to articulate sometimes. Do I think we should unban certain Pokemon? Well, I don't really know, because I haven't looked into Darkrai, I haven't looked into Genesect, and I haven't looked into any other banned Pokemon, and I don't really plan to, because my time as a tier leader is done. My opinion is moot. There is nothing that I really have left to say about it. Do I think that we should eventually unban certain Pokemon? Yeah, we should probably run suspects on it, and I think NJMP's suspect ladder is admittedly a good idea. I think it's a good idea that we should maybe have kind of a seasonal-based ladder which can test different Pokemon and, see what people feel about them. But again, I don't think that's a very reliable way to find opinions on Pokemon. I think, generally speaking, it's, kind of... I don't want to say it's subject to hive mind mentality, but when you have, like, such a frequent, recycling OU metagame with new threats being introduced, I kind of feel that clouds people's judgment, that they are just looking for the next best thing, the next fun metagame, and that you can't really base all your tier decisions off of just a cycling of dropping down Pokemon and seeing if it's broken, dropping down Pokemon and seeing if it's broken at such a fast pace. Even deciding to even test a Pokemon in the first place takes a lot of forethought. And I think that if we were to put a ladder up that has this dynamic of, we decide to test a certain Pokemon, I think that it would have to be a very slow and a very long process, something that we should be able to study and not do on a whim. Because, again, we're probably going to be doing that through a suspect and voting yes or no to drop Pokemon. But if we do that, I think that it should be a very long, arduous process, purposely for the sake of, so we get to recognize that this new Pokemon is not, whether it's broken or not, or if we're judging it just based off of this makes the metagame fun again and shakes it up. Because we need to be able to differentiate between those two concepts. Usage is the main topic I was talking about throughout this video. You see Lando at over 50% usage, which admittedly is fucking astronomical. And in SPL, Lando has a 76 usage stat overall as of week 3. And I believe in week 1 specifically, Lando was at 90%. But that doesn't really mean all that much. And even people who feel like Lando is over-centralizing, while there is a huge jump between these two, the thing is that their only argument, or their main argument, is that it just makes the metagame unhealthy and bad and not fun. And yeah, centralization sometimes can be such a problem that we have to take action, but I don't really see that here. There is not one specific team archetype that's prevalent, because you can use these Pokemon on a lot of different teams. I mean, Toxapex Lando balance is probably the king of the day, but you do see other things too, and I think the metagame, if we look at things like, I think Week 3 stats are up by now. If we look at Week 3 stats, the Lando usage is dropping because people are realizing there is more counterplay to it as a reaction to this Pokemon. And now I don't know how much this usage is going to drop. I have no idea how far it will go down, and to be honest, I don't really care because, like I said, I don't think there's a problem with this usage anyway. But as it is, I think the metagame is perfect. You can say it's bad all you want. You can say that this metagame is not fun. That's fine. You can say that. But the second you use this metagame is not enjoyable criteria as your main judging criteria for dropping or banning Pokemon, that's when you're going into the realm of anarchy, of chaos, because we can't have a stable metagame if we base it only on how much we enjoy it. That's just not how things work. And that is why my philosophy as a tier leader is that Pokemon, competitive Pokemon, is serious business. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this video, I don't really mean for this to be like call it or anything, but I do think that someone needed to say something about the video. Not the video, the line of thought that people have. Because you can't just go around judging everything off of, I feel this metagame is bad, which I feel is becoming a recent trend. So with that, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the competitive analysis, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.